and welcome to Confetti All Around, a podcast sponsored by Rooted in Reflection. And I am your host, Cynthia Perez, a therapist in LA. And I am so excited to have Hope Carpenter of Hope Healing Arts with us today. You can find their Instagram at Hope Healing Arts. And their work, you've seen it. You've seen her memes everywhere. On Instagram, it's always shared because it's so beautiful. So we're going to get into that and a little bit about their journey and how they really came to share their art and creativity with us. So Hope, thank you so much for being here with me.
I'm so honored that you reached out to me, and I'm so excited to dive into some juicy conversations together. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And I like to start off with just some first impressions because, I mean, Hope, your account, I don't know if this was your big mission when you did it, but your account is so, it's not just eye-catching, it moves you. You know, your body feels it when you see it. I'm sure I'm going to get comments where people are like, yes. If you don't know, go right now to Instagram and look up Hope Healing Arts and look at some of their artwork because it's beautiful. But I noticed the first impressions I felt with your work, Hope, is soft, nostalgic, and vulnerable. Do you feel like those words, like, is that what you were going for a little bit with that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but my favorite color is pink. And I definitely feel like it's sort of a return to the softness and the sensitivity and the heart-centeredness that I had as a child, that there was a long period of my life where I didn't have access to those qualities. And so leaning into pink, leaning into that softness, the vulnerability, and the sensitivity is one way that I've retrieved my wholeness and allowed myself to embrace those qualities again. So it definitely came from a place of not necessarily wanting to like broadcast that as a brand, but just making those choices to make myself feel happy in my healing process. So it was more of like
Beautiful.
I'm giving this as a gift to myself. And it's so cool that other people can feel that when they're, in relationship to me on social media. And going to my page and seeing all of the nostalgia, the 80s and 90s cartoons, it's like that was
Yeah.
just a gift to my inner child. Saying to myself, I just want to take social media so much less seriously because I did have a period of, being on TikTok and the drama and the, very adult stuff. And then just being like, you know what? I just want to have fun. I just want to play. I just want to do things that make little me feel happy and seen. And then that allowed other people to feel seen in my content. So I feel like there's ways to make an impact that aren't so like serious or, grown up, that we can have fun and let our inner child out. And that can be impactful too.
Beautiful. And with exactly what you were saying, the words that I wrote down for how that makes me feel when I look at your work, when I look at your work, it's soft, nostalgic, and vulnerable, but what I feel is an invitation and an intention. And so I really feel like you are inviting my inner child. And I consider myself an inner child hype woman, but what with you, I see your work and I'm like, you're really embodying when we talk about reparenting our inner child, when we talk about doing inner child work, you're really giving us an example of everyday ways we can talk to our inner child or how we can create this strong but also soft voice, how we can be vulnerable and how breathtaking it could be instead of like, and you're using, it's really your art. You do it so beautifully, Hope. I don't know.
Thank you.
I know there's a lot of memes everywhere. Memes, you didn't, I'm not saying you created memes, but the way you do it, I just want to like hold space for you as like, you are going to be, I think this is like a moment in time that we needed it. But as an inner child therapist, it's the way that you pair the pictures. It's not lost on me with the nostalgia of the inner child, the beautiful picture that we see, and then you're putting your beautiful poetry to it. So thank you. I love that.
Thank you.
yeah, it gives me a little picture about your sweet inner child. So, can you tell me a little bit
Oh,
about how you got into your own inner child work and like
yeah.
what reparenting has meant for you?
Absolutely. And it really ties into the memes as well, because when I first started doing inner child work, it was from, a therapeutic lens. I didn't actually start with inner child work in therapy. I actually started on a retreat in Southeast Utah, up on a mountaintop. And one of the guides
Yeah.
was having us connect to, different pieces that were in our shadow. And one of the pieces of my psyche was like this little wild child that had been told to be quiet and had been told to take up less space and had been told to stop, being so exuberant and loud. And so accessing that little me inside of my shadow was like life altering. I wrote that little me a letter. I started connecting with that part of myself more in my everyday life, and then started going deeper in therapy as well and connecting to all of these aspects of myself that my inner child, exemplified really well, but society kind of plucks these pieces away from us. But then I started to realize that my inner child work was very like serious. It was very sort of focused on, touching the woundedness of the inner child. And I started realizing that my inner child just wanted to play, just wanted to do, more things that were joyful, more things that sparked, lightheartedness in me. And so I started, painting more, started making memes, just things that,
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily always have to be this like painful excavation of trauma. It can also be, just going for a walk and
Yes.
seeing how magical the world is. Like that is so healing, especially as a survivor.
Beautiful. Thank you, Hope. And you know, for you to do it, I'm picturing you. I think about like when people explain things, I'm already drawing the picture in my mind and I'm like drawing a picture of who little Hope is and what
Mm,
she offers the world. And I really see it as like if you wouldn't have done this inner child work, sure, maybe you wouldn't have created Hope Healing Arts,
mm.
but your words really, we can go if we're scrolling through and seeing some pretty gnarly things on social media.
Oh, yeah.
At least there's your account that can give us in real time
Mm,
some sentences, some phrases we can say that
mm,
touches something within us. And I just think like what a great, this is a perfect example of how our inner child can do so much as a ripple effect because
mm.
now we have Hope, little Hope
Yeah.
texting on these memes and look how many lives you've touched. I see
Mm.
your comments and they're like, I really needed this. How has that impacted you? Does your inner child go like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Or how has it felt for you
I love
doing
that
that?
question because, just to kind of dive into my story, I was very lonely as a child. And I was put in a situation like moving to a different country with my mom, and like I didn't speak the language, and I was in school there, and I just like really badly wanted to connect to the other kids, but like they wouldn't give me the time of day because I couldn't understand them. And so just
Mm,
little me would feel so not understood and so just like on my own. And at the time, I was an only child because my brother hadn't been born yet, but I was very like shy, kind of by myself. And I just felt like nobody will ever understand me. And then now to see, okay, I just wasn't in the right environment because now I'm in a situation where like there are people that get me, right? And I think that's the magic
right,
of social media because no matter who you are, you can find a million other people that are like you. And to have
right.
that, that barrier of geography and everything else kind of taken away, and like some of the other barriers of, age and walk of life and all of that stuff, and just see like, wow, these people that live somewhere completely different, that, come from, a different background, can still connect because they've shared some similar experiences, and, they have similar traits and qualities. Just to see that, I think it's a miracle every day. I'm grateful for social
Yeah.
media every day. But as you touched on, it can also, like, scrolling can also be a really destabilizing experience because it'll be, here's every atrocity that's happening right now in the world.
Yeah.
And then here's memes. Like, that's hard to reconcile. You know, that's something that I've been working with in my own process for sure.
Yeah. And what I love, to remind myself, like, because I do therapy, but I'm really trying to really, with rooted in reflection, I try to show myself as like, I'm going to show up authentically. I'm going to show up, and really we are equals, and you have the tools to heal yourself, and here's this inner child work. And so I like to present it like that. But kind of what you were saying with like, we've all I thought that it was just me, or I thought I would be alone in the way that I felt. But inner child work gets to present us as like, well, we've all been children. So we can all kind of connect
Mm-hmm.
with what it was like to have these places. And so I think that your beautiful intention of choosing to have your work be, this is what they scroll and this is what they're going to find
Mm-hmm.
in a world where a lot of things are like just shocking, jaw dropping, um, and I think that's why I'm really gravitating to you. I myself, in doing this inner child work, I took a few CEU courses. I found myself doing it on my own, and I would have these like profound inner meditations. But at the end of the day-to-day work for me was playing in the garden with my kids. It
Mm-hmm.
started even as small as like creating a fairy garden, in this little patch of garden. We didn't have much,
Mm-hmm.
but it was putting the little fairy things. And then
Oh.
neighbors were like, what is that? And I was like, oh, we're doing a little fairy garden. And, it was me mostly, right? Like,
Yeah.
why are you going to move that fairy? Like, it looks good right there. And I started to notice like my inner child had a preference, right? And they had
Mm-hmm.
an expectation, and
Mm-hmm.
really letting my inner child play with my kids. But I think in us being able to show, I don't know if you could tell from my work, but I really want to show inner child work as joyful,
Mm-hmm.
as also like, this is grief, but let's see where it came from. And even these shadows, these shadow versions of ourselves, were also trying to help us. So I really was
Mm-hmm.
intentional in showing inner child work with joy.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I look at yours, it's like, I wrote down that, for me, this work feels spirit led. And when I see you, Hope, I see healing arts as like, okay, Cynthia, you alone do not have to worry about the whole world, because there's
Exactly.
people put in places, like you said, geographically, it doesn't matter, that are
Mm-hmm.
also doing this work.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's just you healing your own inner child and then sharing some of your wisdom that ripples, and you standing firm and being a good person, me over here in a different city, like your work and the comments and how many people are touched by it lets me remember that we don't all have to be holding up the world, but all of us kind of just doing our work to build our awareness and build softness. It reminds me that we can all do it in our own spaces.
That just gave me chills. And it reminds me
Oh,
of, do you know that movie, My Dinner with Andre? It was like 1983.
I remember it, but was there a seal in that movie?
I don't think so. The whole movie is like
Okay,
just
so
a
tell me.
dinner, but there's this one part where this one character is talking about how, saving the world basically involves like just little lighthouses all over the earth, and just like
Mm,
being that little lighthouse, and then people gravitate towards that light. So just thinking about everybody doing their healing work, everybody stepping into that role of, uplifting others, is shining that light out to people, and then people that are ready can move towards that light. And so there's these little like sanctuaries, or beacons, where people can feel safe to do that work. So yeah, I mean, sometimes in the past I felt like I need to carry all of it. I need to carry like Atlas, right, with the whole world on my shoulders, and it's my responsibility to, rescue or fix or be the savior. But it's like, you don't have to carry all of that, but just, do what you can in your little corner of the world, and shine your light out to other people that are in need of that light.
beautiful. I think that you showcase vulnerability really beautifully. And I also wanted to ask you, how were you? Okay, first of all, I'm excited to talk to you so much, Hope, because I love talking about inner child work.
Mhm.
And often I feel like I'm explaining it, I'm teaching it. people are asking questions, but with you, I get to ask because you have your own perspective, your own approach to it. So thank you for letting me like just indulge these
Oh yeah,
questions.
I'm having a blast, and Little Hope is
Good.
having a blast too.
Good. I want, yes, because I can see her in your posts. Like I
Oh,
see
thank you.
them. I see like, just some of the bravery in the
Mhm.
words and the invitation for others to be brave. Like I just imagine she would like, she would like throw the rope to others,
Yeah. Oh.
And I was going to ask you, or both of you, how were you vulnerable as a child? And because I feel like vulnerability is very different. I was just thinking today, like I need to call my cousin and really acknowledge that her vulnerability looks different than mine, and I don't think people acknowledge
Mm.
hers as much as they do mine, because mine is like big and boisterous, and like I'm verbal and I'm like a huggy person. And then I was thinking, and yet she's vulnerable in her
Mm.
own way, in her
Mhm.
range. So I ask you, how were you vulnerable as a child that you can think of that still shows up today, or maybe it was in a completely different way?
Ah, yeah, that's a great question because a memory that I always return to is my first day of preschool. So it must have been like three, yeah, it was probably 3 or 3.5. And I go into the class and everyone's like sitting in a circle and all the parents are there. And the teacher said, okay, who wants to sing a song for everybody? And my hand just shot up, right? It's my first day of preschool. And I stood up and I just started singing the song that I just made up, like just straight from the heart, just singing.
Oh,
And thinking about that, like the bravery that that took, and right away, like, I'll do it, like, I'll share my heart. And then that's something where, later I went through that process of slowly kind of moving away from like, oh, it's actually, actually, I don't have anything to say. Actually, I don't have a song to share. Actually, I shouldn't raise my hand. Other people, have better things to say than me. So, slowly kind of shying away and like social
oh.
anxiety, growing up, feeling less and less like you're allowed to take up that space. I'm inspired by 3-year-old me, like that is a profound
She was on to
memory.
it.
Yeah. There was
Yeah,
just
she
this
was ready to
knowing,
just
right?
keep growing.
Yeah. Just like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I have a song in my heart. I don't know what the next line is. I don't even know like what the melody is, but I can stand up and sing anyway. It doesn't matter.
I love that. Exactly. It doesn't matter. And I kind of just see this hand shooting right up, and then that's how you are. That's beautiful. And really just wanting to be heard as well, but in this beautiful, joyful way, which is also, I feel like I can see that in your art,
Oh,
because
thank
you could
you.
keep it to yourself.
Right.
These are beautiful words. You can like go be a great mom and give your child all of these words, but you share it with us.
Oh,
You know,
yeah,
so
thank you.
vulnerable and brave again. And I feel you, Hope. I feel like I'm vulnerable. I don't know if
Mm.
you see my posts, but I feel
Mhm.
like they're vulnerable. But people might think it comes easy for us.
You do have like
It comes
exude
easy for you.
confidence in the way that you show up, especially with you have like a fierceness that you bring to your
Oh,
content. And it's just like you
thank
come across
you.
with so much power.
Oh, thank you. And I didn't feel that. That's why I want to share, because it's in seeing my inner child, like, Cynthia, what do you want to say? And then letting her do it. Okay, go create a reel. And then being like, okay, like you're getting your point across again in a way that is purposeful. That's what really my mission is. But you're letting her take the reins. And I have felt like just so fulfilled. But I really, it's vulnerable to put our inner child on display
Hmm.
for your art, but also your passion and
Yeah,
also your business. It's really a lot. So I
definitely.
think us, really being protective of them, but
Hmm.
also letting us have the do-over of like, what if you do? What if you do succeed? And look, it's this really beautiful pocket. And another thing, Hope, I saw it in my head when you were explaining kind of like how vulnerability starts like this, big, like your 3-year-old
Yeah.
self, and then slowly it starts to like cave in.
Mm.
I remember my parents are immigrants, and so I love you was not a thing that
Mm.
you say really. You
Hmm.
just kind of show it with like food
Right.
and like things,
Yeah.
like safety and, not with this like word of I love you. And so I remember being like 10 and hearing my friends say I love you to their parents. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to say I love you to my parents. And to me, that was like
That's a
so
lot. Yeah.
big.
Hmm.
And I remember saying, I love you, mom. I love you, dad. And my dad's like, I love you. And I was like, okay. So every day after
Wow.
that, he said, I love you.
Mhm.
But my mom, she couldn't. And she told me, I
Mm.
just can't. I will try, but I don't know if I can because nobody
Wow.
ever said it. And I know that that's like,
Mm. Mhm.
wow. But I remember slowly doing it. And then every day it would kind of get like dimmed.
Wow.
So I I think this has a great story at the end
Mhm.
because a lot of myself was like, but I'm this loving person and how come I can't be like
Mhm.
this with my mom? Well,
Mhm.
now as an adult, I see that that place was like closed
Yeah.
and I've become more vulnerable with her again. I've let it open up and kind of like you said everyone's kind of like a lighthouse. I see my heart being like a lighthouse and I see her being able to be more vulnerable. Maybe it took us, 25 years, but I let it in a little bit and
Yeah.
now little by little I can be more vulnerable again because it's always been there. That love has always
Mhm.
been there. And so I really think that this inner child work is like letting that little person try it again, but also
Yeah.
protecting how they show up vulnerably.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's so many things that I want to connect to in that. But the first piece is how, what you're doing is cycle breaking. You're breaking that
Mm,
cycle, and
thank you.
speaking your love is such a powerful gift to offer, not just your parents, but also, to your children and the next generations,
Mm,
that they don't have to deal with that,
yeah.
that barrier. It's like a lump in your throat. And I can relate to that story a lot because my dad was the exact same way. Like, I did not hear "I love you." And I remember like my first boyfriend in college. His birthday wish was that I would finally say "I love you" back, and it took so
Wow, Hope.
much. Like, I really had to fight against all of the little, shame voices and just say the words, and it was really hard. But now, like, I tell my daughter I love her every single day, and I feel like those.
Can you imagine? People need to hear that. Rewind that
Yeah.
back because that was somebody's wish. And look at all the work you do now. It's
Mhm.
so loving, it's so
Mm.
kind, it's so tender. And here you are. People might have thought, like, oh, well, Hope's just always been like that. Your life must be so
Right.
easy for you to
Yeah.
write like this.
Mhm.
And I can see that there has been you know, for you to be able to write that deep, you have to have felt
Oh.
that deep.
Mhm.
So I just love that. I thank you for sharing that in vulnerability
Mhm.
because that is big. Like not being able to say it to now turning your pain into art
Yeah.
and softness.
Well, it's breaking that cycle, and it can be such difficult work of, it would be a lot easier to just sort of pass along all the patterns that you inherited and to actually turn around. It's like stopping a stream where like everything's going downstream and you're like, like, no, I'm going to turn the water to somewhere else. So, sometimes I feel like, wow, like I could be so much further along in life if only this and this and this hadn't happened. And it's like, no, but I was doing this difficult underground work to like divert the stream to somewhere else, and it starts to finally kind of um, give the rewards of that. But it does take some time
Oh,
because it's like you're doing this hard work
yeah.
and you're like, why couldn't all of you guys before me have done this for me? But
Right.
yeah.
I also see it like as you're talking, I'm like, yes, yes. I was thinking about this the other day, how, we might avoid a place like I don't want to think about it. I don't want to talk about it yet. I'm not there yet,
Mhm.
right? And then we think like it's gonna be too painful, it's gonna be too profound. And then we finally, whether by the universe colliding with us to make us work on it, I think sometimes like I will literally sit up in my bed sometimes and just be in awe, Hope, of like, I have made a profound leap in, yes, I'm doing the underground work, but if you think about it, how much have I grown in a year
Mhm.
versus these 30 years of pain? And
Mhm.
so like I think when we can be in creativity and safety, like I could tell that you're a creative person. I know that that's also your business, but it's who you are. You
Mhm.
are a creative person, but I think when we can be in creativity, it also allows us to be like think of other options, think of other way
Mhm.
out, think
Mhm.
of other ways to end this story. So
Mhm.
then when we are in creativity long enough in our own personal life, we can think of other ways of showing up, of being. So yeah, I just love to imagine that I know it's normal for me to think, oh my gosh, like I have so many things to uncover. And
Mhm.
yet the time at which I can propel myself, my growth is so fast. And I don't think we're even Have you ever felt hope like, I didn't even know I could feel this good? Like, I didn't even know I could feel this much love or acceptance of love?
Yeah, and I feel like that can be a little bit overwhelming to the younger parts of ourselves that like that feels really not safe. But then coming back to, I am deserving, I'm worthy of this. What if it is okay? I love those like
What if
askformations.
it
What if it
is?
is okay for me to be loved? What if I am worthy of this? And so, yeah, I mean, it can just be like, I had no idea that I would actually be able to heal to this extent. And that was my experience with, EMDR, just like feeling, from PTSD, just like hyper vigilant, like at all times. And then now not having any hypervigilance at all, except for, a
Wow.
couple moments here and there. It's just like, I never thought that I would be free of that. I thought that that was a symptom I would just have to live with for the rest of my life. And it's
That's
like,
you.
yeah, it's me. It's just who I am. It's how things are now. I'm broken in some way. And then it's like, oh no, actually, like, these things can actually be healed. Like we can actually do this work and get past that and things can change. And I feel like there's that, the traumatized self will say like things will always be this way because this is what's familiar and this is how we have to
Yeah.
protect ourselves. And then it's like, oh, that creativity, like there is another way. Like there is another way to be that feels revolutionary.
Right. And this is why I wanted you on, because if we were to just look at your scroll, I mean, it's so easy to compare and be
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, she's so good at this. You know what? Forget what I have to say. And it's like what you said, it really holds a place for other people to go, I wonder how much I can expand my
Mm-hmm.
heart. I wonder how much I can take these words and just kind of say it to myself and my journey with this, and
Mm-hmm.
I love that that we can hear your story of like, no, it took this work and this is a new norm for me. I
Yeah.
find myself thinking about this hope. I do a lot of work on talking about epigenetics, which is
Mm-hmm.
really we inherit how we show up based on our ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was thinking about it just today, like it's always been something that we think we want as kids, right? Like, I want my family to say I love you. I want to be held. And then they give it to us. I'm like, whoa, what are you doing? Like,
It's a lot. Yeah.
like with my kids, like
Mm-hmm.
I want to have kids so that they always need me, right? And now
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, right. And
Yeah.
so I'm finding that what if my epigenetics, because I said, my mom wasn't used to hearing I love you. My dad, he said it, but it took work. I'm
Mm-hmm.
wondering if in my epigenetics, there is this switch that like isn't turned on for softness yet. It isn't turned on
Mm.
for leaning in and close contact, because for so many generations, it's been distant, it's been
Mm-hmm.
cold. And so I'm even like, wow, I can feel myself in these moments having to soften. Even
Mm-hmm.
though I say, I wanted this, I can feel it. Like just this morning, I I purposely will give myself these moments where I like lay with my kids and I soften to them, and they're like, okay, it's fine. And then they're like, they really love it and they're relishing, and then I get a moment of like, I've literally never had this in my life.
Mm-hmm.
It came from nothing. I didn't learn it from somewhere. I like, it's almost like exposure therapy. I have to tolerate it,
Mm.
and I end up really feeling the softness, but I'm intentional about it. Have you noticed yourself like bringing out softness in you when you feel like you want to like ground something that is like, I guess, not to say it's not natural in you, it's not a habit, something that you've been working on to intentionally
Yeah.
create softness that maybe wasn't there, or just hasn't been uncovered in the years?
Definitely. I mean, the thing that's coming to mind for me is, some ancestral trauma around like survival and scarcity and how you have to just like devote yourself to work and there's nothing except work. Like you are your productivity. That's it. Otherwise, you're dead, right? Like that was
Yeah.
sort of a lot of the trauma on my mom's side. And so she had that a lot with like working hard her whole life, always doing the right thing. Me sort of being alone at home in the afternoons, being like, well, I guess I'll have like a bite of butter from the fridge because I don't know how to cook, like just, sort of on my own. And then,
Yeah.
growing up, like now being an adult and having a child, I have to remind myself, like, I'm not just my work. I also get to play. I also get to be present with my child. that can take a moment sometimes of like, I don't always have to be thinking about, okay, where's, what am I going to do next? My to-do list. Like,
Yeah.
I do have a Capricorn rising, so, I'll show you. Like, my to-do list is always like a page
Let's
long.
see.
It's always there, but I'm realizing like that's inherited trauma, and I'm not supposed to just be constantly grinding. And my mom was telling me about how her relatives, like during the war, would have to, like, there's no food in the grocery store, so they would have to go into the woods and like pick acorns and kind of forage in the woods, and everyone was
Yeah.
starving, and just realizing like, wow, it is such a blessing to live in a time right now where I am, where I don't have to worry about that like really hard survival stuff, but I still have that feeling in me like, it's not safe 100% to relax. You still have to always kind of be, gathering acorns everywhere all the time, and like, just realizing like, okay, I can soften into this moment. Like my
Yeah.
ancestors would want me to have a better life than they had. That's another thing. I'm like, would they be happy about my life? I don't know.
I mean, I really believe that they are looking down and saying like, "Great, now you can rest with this." And I can picture you in beautiful moments like when you're eating a delicious, meal that is something you enjoy, something that is nourishing. That would be a beautiful moment to connect with them and just say,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, we're doing great. We can slow down and enjoy this
Mm-hmm.
moment. We're going to take an hour and a half lunch." And I can really see
Mm,
them just being like, yes, like this is
mm.
for you. But I know it's hard.
Yeah. I just
Is
I,
that, is
I
that,
just had this big like healing moment, and yeah, I'm like gonna cry
oh,
because I realized that I always like eat really fast. And so
mm,
when you said an hour and a half lunch, that part of me, that epigenetically affected part of me was like, no, you have to eat in 2 minutes because otherwise you won't get to eat. So I'm like, my daughter's always like, what? How do you eat so fast? Because she's a slow eater, like she takes her time. And so I'm going to let myself be inspired by her, and that she doesn't have to deal with this, inherited, like, okay, just shovel the food down and get back to work attitude. Like, it's okay to sit
beautiful.
and, maybe have like one blackberry and just enjoy it, and then have another one and just savor the taste and the smell and everything.
Right. And like doing it with her. That's one thing my friend one day in doing this inner child work, I noticed that I would give myself everything last, or like I would like literally save the moldy strawberry for myself.
Mm,
And I'm like, what is that about?
mm,
Like there's enough strawberries where even you're deserving of a strawberry
mm,
with your children. You don't have to have the moldy one.
yeah.
And really looking at like, what is this? Why do you feel that your need comes last? And that is even a place where it can be so moving that
Mm,
it's like, I didn't even know that that pocket was there.
yeah.
What I've been doing, Hope, I mentioned this in another episode, but I really mean this so much. And I feel like someone like you would really see me in this. I will intentionally, mindfully watch my kid eat. Like the other day I made a grilled cheese sandwich
Mhm.
because it was their favorite. Now he's like over
Yeah,
grilled cheese. You know
it's
how it
a week
is. We
later,
have a
so
kid the
we're
same
not
age.
doing that anymore.
Right, right. And you're like, I bought all the things. But he likes it crunchy, and I made myself sit there and just observe thoughts that I had, thoughts that my inner child would have. Because when I would eat, I felt like I would get criticized. Like, you're gonna gain weight. Do you have to eat that all? Why do you eat so fast? Why do you eat so greasy? Why are you so messy?
Mm,
Just constant. And it was like the chewing was almost to block out the criticisms in my family.
mm,
And so I sat there, Hope, and was like, just observe him. And I had like tears, Hope. At
mm,
first I was like, look how beautiful he is, right?
mhm,
Like, oh my God, he loves the food I made. It was like started out big and grand. And then I started to be like, that's not what you had. Everybody, you couldn't enjoy a sandwich alone.
mm,
You couldn't be messy. And I started to feel this sadness, this grief for my inner
mm,
child. But forcing myself to just observe, I came around to gratitude of like, but look, you're not going to pass that to him.
mhm,
you're not going to mention anything about how he's eating. And then I started to notice how beautiful he was again. Like it's almost like shifting
Yeah.
the lens on it, right? Like I could either get really upset that I didn't have it, or I can clear the lens to be like, look how beautiful this kid is eating messy. Like it's pretty beautiful. And then allowing myself to be in that same space and
Mhm.
eat, just eat something I enjoy. Don't think about the calories, don't think about how I'm eating it, and just be. So I just wanted to share that with you because
I
it
love
was like
that.
a moment that I was like swept up by inner
Yeah.
child, like,
And it's like the
profoundness.
two things of, you're holding the grief and the joy of breaking the cycle at the same time. And they're both
Yes.
valid. And I've been working on this in therapy a lot, actually, of like the duality of things that just coexist. And I always come back to this Bjork lyric: I carry my joy on the left, I carry my pain on the right, and how they just, you know, we're allowed to just hold both of those in our hands and face them with love. And like, it's okay that I have this grief, and it's okay if it doesn't just like poof disappear, because it is a real feeling, and you're allowed to feel that grief. Your little you is allowed to feel like, why didn't I have that? That's an okay feeling to have.
Yeah, duality in inner child work has been everything. And I feel like it honors my connection with like you, Hope, because in honoring my grief, when you tell a story, I can go, wow, wow, you experienced that. Let myself get there with you because I
Mm.
can go there myself, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like the more you're able to look at your own pain, the more you're able to hold space for other people's. And like, it is the connection point, if that makes sense. And
Beautiful.
then,
Yeah.
also the topic of boundaries comes in there too, because I'm in grad school to be a therapist. So I'm like kind of working towards what you're doing as well. It's like, I don't want to get so swept away with other people's pain that I'm like, okay, we're going to have to create like a little bit of a boundary where compassion is there, but not, total enmeshment and despair. So that's something I'm
Yeah,
trying
I
to
think
work.
you offer so many ways, and that's actually perfect what I wanted to get into of can you paint the picture of how you step into your creativity? Is it something that you plan? Is it structured? Is it like throw some things out there and you're going to play around with different
Mm.
mediums? Kind of set the scene on how you are when you're letting your inner child create, or even just big hope, adult hope. What does your
Yeah.
creativity look like?
Definitely. So ideally, and sometimes it deviates from my intentions, but
Yeah,
ideally, I'm just sort of open to receiving ideas. And that means that when an idea comes in, just like a little flash of like a little glint of something, I immediately make a note of it, because my neurodivergent brain will lose it. Like, it will just be gone forever. So I have to just like pull this thread down from wherever it's coming from, just like a little note in my notes app or in my journal, and then
same.
come back to it when I have time to actually sit with it. And then if I don't have any ideas, I'll just kind of sit in silence, or, sit outside in the sun and just kind of ask, maybe with a hand on the heart, like, okay, what's something that people need to hear today? Or what's something that can come through me today? So I can kind of open myself up in that way too. It's like a spiritual practice for me. And then once I have that idea, it'll just be like a little cloudy something. And then I just have to trust that if I just sit with that, right? It's like painting, like your first strokes don't necessarily determine what the whole thing's going to look like. So I might have an idea of what it's going to look like at the end, but then by the time I get to the end of the process, it's become something completely different. It's like bloomed into something else. So just, I feel like it's just trust and openness, and like a hands off of like what it's just coming through me. And I like that feeling of letting go and surrender, and, stepping out of the control piece, that like Capricorn rising of like, okay, the to-do list, like
Yeah.
giving myself that. It is like play, whether it's a painting or a post or something like that. It is playful. So that's my
I
process.
really love that, Hope. And I just want to be honest. I was like, I'm so glad you shared your process because I think for people that are like new to honoring their creativity, me, I would say that I'm fairly new at like stepping in. Like what you see as fierce is fairly new, but I love that you said, like, it's not something that's like, boom, creative, bam,
Yeah.
best work ever, went viral. You're like, I have a thought or an intention, I put it in, and I might come back to it. I might roll the ball around. I call it like rolling the ball around.
Mm-hmm.
But and then I got a little bit of grief in thinking that, okay, I get why you do it, Hope. Your inner child has a safe place to do it. You're giving them the timing. You're saying that it doesn't have to be, all in one lump. You can get back to it. So they feel like affirmed to
Mm-hmm.
do it. And I got a little bit of grief of like how often in childhood we were stopped in the middle of our
Right.
joy,
Yeah.
because our joy is our creativity, playing, and then we're like,
Mm-hmm.
this idea, it's kind of right here, and it's circling our consciousness, and then we're like taken out of it, and maybe that's why we get upset. But how often our flow is disrupted because we're just kids. Like, who cares what we're doing? Who cares what we're into? So I just, I'm not sad about it, but I see it in like why you can be
Mm-hmm.
creative. You're giving your inner child permission. You're letting them flow, and you're not being rigid on it. So I'm glad you said it, because for people like us, new to really honoring it, I think that is a really beautiful tip on how to just,
Yeah.
call to it. Thank
Well,
you.
totally. Yeah. And I feel like, the inner protector, the inner perfectionist will pop up at some point and say, well, this isn't good enough yet. Like, this isn't good enough to work on. Like, you should just not do anything at all, right? Like, just, you should go do the dishes because that's something that, like,
Right.
needs to get done. Whereas if you have this, like, half-formed little thought, it's, you don't know what it could even turn into yet. So, orienting towards curiosity, even if it's like, well, this isn't good enough. Like, this isn't perfect, so I should just not create it. Thinking, okay, if I step into the curiosity, the wonder, the surrender, the trust, maybe it will become good enough. Like, once I actually devote myself to it versus like, I'm just going to give up because it's not anything. And I, come back to, I don't remember where I read this, but how the Pixar company,
Mhm.
like the writers have um, this way that they do things in the writers' room called like the ugly baby or something, where they like any idea that they have, they call it like an ugly baby and realize that this like taking care of it, nurturing it, giving it time, like fully developing the story takes a long time. So it's like raising a baby, right? And so just, okay, you
Yeah.
don't just throw out every idea just because it doesn't already look perfect. Like, you actually have to spend time nurturing things. So it's almost like a little like parenting mini process, and at the same time having to also step out of like I don't know, putting all of your like need for love and validation into your creative ideas as well. Like, that's been a big thing for me.
Right. I love that. I love that. And I wanted to ask you, when was there a moment where you were like, yeah, this is my art. I'm claiming, was there ever a time where you were like, no, it's just this little thing that I do, and now you're like, my words, the way I put it together, it is my art, where you stepped into it? Was there like an integration, or was it like a soft kind of acceptance?
Yeah, I would say one huge thing for me was rereading The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. I don't know if you've read that book, but it's
I've been
chef
recommended to that.
yeah, definitely read
Okay.
it. Yeah,
Okay. I will
definitely.
get that.
There's a lot of inner child work in it, but she doesn't call it that explicitly. But I feel like there's a lot of invitations to awaken your inner artist child in that book, and a lot of prompts to
Beautiful.
get through, like, okay, where have I been blocked from claiming my, my art and my deserving of being an artist. But there was a time, when I went through that book again and realized, like, I am allowed to claim that, this is my creativity, this is my art, it is worthy, like, it does deserve my attention, and it's not just, play, but it's actually art as well.
Beautiful. Is there ever a part, because just by talking to you, Hope, and like the communication we've had leading up to this, you're a real, like, you keep it real. You are a soft hearted person, but you're also, always continuing to grow. Is there a part of you that, like, you're kind of in it where you have 190,000 followers now on Instagram. And maybe people say, I want that. And where part of you is like, wow, like this is this private thing that is so personal. It's not private, but like it's so personal. And there's so many people. Is there something that you have to do to like protect yourself or preserve
Mm.
your own kind of old habits of like, talk?
Definitely. I mean, one thing I do, like I said, I allow my inner child to come out in my process and to play and to enjoy the creative, art of content making. But then I invite my inner child to go back into that safe, happy, protected place of my heart and to not participate in the whole like circus of social media, like likes and followers and the numbers, the vanity metrics, like that. I feel like separating my inner child from that is very powerful because well, on the one hand, yes, that part of me that was lonely and that always wanted to belong is just amazed of like, oh my God, we have, whatever, 190K friends out there that like love us. Yay, this is amazing. But it's such a like merry-go-round and up and down
Yeah.
that I don't want my inner child to be like, oh, today people don't like us as much. Today people love, like both of those are kind of
Right.
like they don't reflect on my inner child's worth or value or lovability. So it's like, okay, this I got this part. Like you're safe, like you're valid no matter what, and you belong like already. So I got the rest of this. And then, grown me kind of deals with the whole like grown me is like the social media manager, and then little me is like the artist behind everything.
I
So
love that totally. I totally get it. Hope, thank you so that was such a great way to explain it. And maybe, like I geek out on it because I totally see it and that's how I feel too. Like one of my old logos was a nesting doll with like a little doll next to it because when we
oh
are doing stuff, it's like I'm talking to her, it's like we have a little huddle, right?
yeah.
And like nothing gets through this and then I can put on my adult face and handle the world for them. So I really love that. I really love that. And I have just a couple more
Yeah.
questions if that's
I'm
okay.
loving our
Okay, great.
our chat. So
Good. Me too. Me too. Thank you. And I got to say, I think I told you this a while ago. But just these signs, I before I chose Rooted in Reflection as the branding, I would always wear this rainbow stuff because I was like, I want the work I do to be joyful. We have a lot of like, take this training on, and then the topics are just like sad and
mhm,
boring, and So I always wanted to present joyful and relatable and
mhm,
real.
mhm.
And I would always say like, but I see myself as this Care Bear,
Yes, you're
and my
such a Care Bear.
compassion. The way that I teach like guided visualization is like visualize it in your third eye and then beam yourself your compassion, whether it's in your heart or in your tummy, and beam it a color, give it a color, and like beam it through
Mm,
you onto that person. And then your mind believes it happened. So then your body is going to be more relaxed. And I teach the brain science on it. But I would always picture the Care Bear stare.
yes.
And then I found you and I was like, she gets it.
Yes.
And then you just kept going. It's not just the nostalgia, but it's that Care Bear stare kind of compassion,
Mm,
how the compassion within us can really ground us, but also beam to other people. And I can see it through you.
mm.
So thank you for giving that. The Care Bear ones really like touch my heart. And sometimes I'll get through with sessions and I'll just be carrying like just this heaviness of people's sessions, and I'll take a break, I'll scroll Instagram, and you will have exactly what I need to hear that day.
Oh,
So just know that, your inner child is really giving us gifts, but also you're the manager that lets us play with you and with them. So thank you.
yeah.
With that, I have a question.
Mm.
What are your inner child like favorite things? Like you're grounding, you're going to give them what they want. What are they asking for, like sensory wise? Or what are we eating? What are we watching? What paint the scene?
That's a great question. One of the main things that my inner child always wants is softness. So just connecting with like blankets, like how many pillows can we have? I do have a pink Care Bear stuffed animal, Cheer Bear. So Cheer
Same.
Bear is with me. In terms of watching, like with my 6 year old, I'll watch, old movies from when I was a kid. My favorite was Never Ending Story. That was, the ultimate. Like I
Same.
would dream about it.
Yes.
loved every single part of it. I knew it by heart. I probably still do. So that was, that was the pinnacle for sure. Um, and then there's been some newer Disney movies that my inner child loves that didn't exist back then. So, rewatching Frozen and Frozen 2 a bunch of times with my kid. Moana, that one is so heartwarming. There's so many good ones.
Love
And
Moana.
then Turning
Yes.
Red that just came out this last year, that was powerful. There's so many good like inner child healing scenes in that one. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And then in terms of foods, I'm kind of like, should I even say this? Like instant ramen. Oh my God, there's just something about that. Like it's just obviously adult me is like, no, let's go to like the real ramen shop and have,
Yeah.
like the real deal. But then little me is like, no, but I love cracking the egg in it. And, it's just so like, it's just so warming. Like that just feels really good to little me.
And isn't it kind of, it makes sense. A child can make ramen,
Hmm.
so they feel like I'm making this. It's something that I'm making. It's warm. It's noodles. Who doesn't love noodles? And it's like a potion. You can add things to
Oh,
it, right? And like
hmm.
my inner child loves to just do this little like adding,
Yeah.
creating. So I could see why ramen is a childhood favorite, right? Because there's just so much you could do with ramen.
What's your
Again,
inner
creative.
child food? I gotta know right now.
Well, it's
Oh
ramen,
my
Hope.
God.
It's ramen. Yes. I was craving ramen last night, and I'll tell you what, I love that you said that. I have these pita chips, the popular brand,
Yeah.
but the pita chips, but they're the thin kind. I told my husband, these are legit ramen chips. They taste like ramen when it's dry. Remember when you were a kid and sometimes you just
Yeah.
put the
Oh,
sauce on
totally. Yeah.
and you would crunch it? So thin pita chips are also a nice substitution for dry
Ooh,
ramen.
that's good
But
to, because I
I
love
love
dipping. I
ramen.
love sauces. So that I'm gonna have to.
Ooh, so you're like a taster. You can
Yeah.
do you like snacks?
I do like snacks. I like anything that you can kind of like pick a little of and just keep kind of snacking on. That's definitely me, like
Like I
popcorn.
feel like charcuterie boards, if they would have had that more when we were kids, like birthday parties with the has a dessert bar, we didn't have that when I was a kid, or
Yeah.
like charcuterie
We
boards,
had
right? That's inner
Lunchables. I
child.
feel like that's sort of the
Yes.
childhood version.
Totally.
Like being at school and someone
Totally.
had the little like pizza Lunchable and you're just like, can I please have like one little pizza? That's
Right.
like,
It's like the
yeah.
novelty.
Hmm.
Oh, I love it. Okay, and then my last question for you, Hope, is how would you like to be remembered as a living ancestor? So everything we're doing now is a living ancestor. Your work is your work as a living ancestor. How would you like to be remembered in what you're doing now as an ancestor later? So how are you representing your lineage for your daughter as a living ancestor? What do you want to be remembered
That is
as?
such a powerful question. The first thing that comes to mind is loving awareness towards the parts of ourselves that never felt lovable. Like, any part of myself that's not felt lovable, I want to shine like that Care Bear stare, like sparkly light on and say, like, no, you're lovable too, come back. And I feel like loving awareness or compassion is kind of the disarming of shame. And so letting that melt away is very powerful too. And being able to see anything through the eyes of loving awareness is just such a powerful tool in healing. I feel like that just goes, beyond um, like mental comprehension. It's like all heart work and soul work. So I would say, yeah, anything to do with like loving awareness and compassion. Um, the idea that you're always lovable no matter what. Like, nobody's perfect. You're human. You're allowed to be messy. You're allowed to make mistakes. You maybe didn't have the best coping strategies when you were just starting to figure out how to be a human being, but now you can hold that part of you with that compassion of like, yeah, you're lovable, like even if, you're not perfect. So I would say that's
Beautiful.
probably the biggest. And then the fact that compassion doesn't always have to be like a warm hug, it can also be a sword. So, thinking about the fierce side of compassion, I just read that Kristen Neff book last year. My therapist lent it
Oh
to me.
yeah.
I was just like that's exactly right. Like our ability to be in that fiery, like that little fiery sacred heart emoji, like that's compassion too. And sometimes that's going to mean making some powerful moves and doing things that are fierce and strong. It doesn't always have to be like everything's okay. Sometimes it can be like,
Right.
no, things aren't okay, and we're going to change things and we're going to do things a better way, even if it's hard. So to me, that's compassion too.
Beautiful. Thank you. And as you were saying it, I think the takeaway of like you as an ancestor is like this feeling that you give when you're, like when you're brought up, like it just sounds like you're this embodied, like you're this feeling that when your daughter speaks of you is like how you make people feel with your loving awareness. It's like this glow. I can feel it on you. Thank you,
Oh,
Hope.
thank you. Oh,
Yeah. So tell us, please. If we're not already following, we're gonna. So tell us where we can find you, what you have in store, what are your future projects, and
yeah.
anywhere that we can contact you for
Thank
more work.
you. Yeah, so Instagram at Hope Healing Arts. I'm on Twitter as well, but it's like a very small account. Also at Hope Healing Arts. And then I have a website. It's hopemagic.com. It's hope and then magick.com. And right now, I'm getting ready to host my second version of the class, Radical Visibility, which is about stepping into letting people see the real you. So I feel like that's something that is scary for a lot of people. So that's something that
Yeah.
I'm offering in a couple of weeks. And then I just sort of pepper little classes like that throughout the year. So definitely check out my Instagram for more information. But yeah, thank you so much for allowing me to share that and for being on your podcast. I really have had so much fun in this conversation.
Me too, Hope. Thank you so much. And I will be, I will remain following you, and I can't wait to just hold space for your art every time I see it. Thank you, Hope.